Tax fairness advocates are raising the alarm this week after it was learned that the Canada Revenue Agency has arrived at a secret out-of-court settlements with rich Canadians who've been involved in a tax avoidance scheme. The tax agency has called it negligent and a sham and vowed to crack down on the scheme. Court documents indicate that the CRA has settled with several wealthy family members in a tax dodge known as the Isle of Man scheme, which has been negotiated by accountancy firm KPMG as far back as 1999 for a number of wealthy Canadians. Revenue Minister Diane Leboutillier 2 years ago promised to crack down on the scheme, but the latest revelations have renewed the controversy. Toby Sanger is with the advocacy group Canadians for Tax Fairness, and he joins me now in the studio. Mr. Sanger, thanks for coming in.
Thanks very much for having us.
Okay, well, just refresh people's memory. I referred to this scheme, the Isle of Man scheme. What exactly is it, and how does it work?
So what KPMG, which is an accounting and tax consultancy firm, did in the late 90s, they developed this scheme. We'll call it a scheme for wealthy people to not pay tax. And what it involved was them. These are millionaires, so the minimum amount was $5 million. They would gift money to a corporation set up in the Isle of Man,
well-known tax haven,
which is a tax haven just off the coast of England, and then every year they would get a gift. It was classified as a gift of money back, and gifts are not taxable, and so KPMG apparently, according court documents, said that you won't have to pay any tax on this. So we have there are examples of very wealthy multi-millionaires who paid zero tax, and in fact they got tax credits back from the government. Meanwhile, they were receiving over a course of years millions in dollars on this, so they didn't pay any tax.
Now, as I mentioned, we have learned, and this is through some digging by investigative journalists, it's sort of come to light that there have been some settlements made in recent weeks or recent months. What do we know about the settlements?
So we know nothing about the settlements. We just know when they happened, and that's the problem. So this whole scheme came to light, and the CRA pursued some actions against some of the people. KPMG refused to provide them with a list of all the people that they had promoted this scheme to. But this case against this family called the Coopers, who had $25 million in this, was proceeding. The CRA reached out of court settlements with some of the other people who voluntarily came forward. This case was continued, but then we just heard in the past week that the CRA reached an out-of-court settlement with them. So they're not pursuing it. It's not going to court, and whatever deal that they made is secret. Now, unfortunately, the CRA had reached agreements with the others involved in this to just pay their back taxes plus a modest amount of interest. Okay. So there's no deterrent on this. We look at other examples of people breaking laws in other areas, and I'm careful to say that this isn't necessarily tax evasion; it's tax dodging, because this hasn't gone to court. You want to have some sort of penalty.
But you say though the CRA has recovered some of the monies in terms of back taxes in some other cases.
They've recovered some of the money in terms of back taxes, but presumably not all of it. And with this family, they said, well, we would have paid lower taxes because this should be counted as a capital gains on which people pay half the rate of tax.
Okay. So what's wrong with this out-of-court settlement? Is it the secrecy, or is it because we don't know what the out-of-court settlement is?
Well, it's a number of things. Yeah. One, that there's no deterrent there, very little deterrent against engaging in these tax dodging schemes. Okay. Very little deterrent. both among those who were involved in it and also among the promoters of these schemes.
Right. But the CRA, I mean, I'll just take the devil's advocate. Diane Le Boutillier, the revenue minister, had declared that they were going to crack down on this type of loophole and that they were going to come after people. So they state that they're pursuing this.
They said that they were pursuing it, but there's very little. First of all, it looks like they may have paid lower rate of tax than ordinary Canadians pay on their taxes. Okay. So they did reach an out-of-court settlement. There hasn't been any openness on this. Okay. Ironically enough, Canada is hosting this Open Government Partnership Global Summit this week. It's all about openness and transparency. But if you don't have if you don't go to court, one, you're not setting a precedent on this. Right. You're probably making a deal that is somewhat favorable to the taxpayer. Maybe the government is saving time in terms of court costs, but you're not sending that deterrent. And our concern is that we have basically different justice systems for those who are wealthy and who can afford high-priced lawyers to defend themselves and or intimidate the government, and the rest of us.
This issue came up in question period today, and the parliamentary secretary repeated what the minister has said, and that is Minister Diane Le Boutillier has said that she wants to get to the bottom of what she calls a lack of transparency. She thinks that there's more information needed. I mean, obviously, tax files are personal information, and some of it is a personal secret. Mm-hmm. But she says she wants to have more accountability, more transparency. What do you make of her comments?
Well, I'm very supportive of that, but let's see some steps. I mean, a step towards more transparency is actually being more transparent about the settlement. Mm-hmm. Well, you can preserve some sort of confidentiality, and the government could publish some aggregate information on the settlements. Yeah. In this case. In other cases, when they go forward with criminal cases, the CRA sends out a press release. In this, it took a journalist, an impressive investigative journalist, to find out about this. So you could say that you send out a press release to say that you've reached a settlement in this case, and in other ways. There's a lot of ways to be more transparent about this. Also, ironically, Liberal Senator Percy Downs' bill S which went through the Senate, and mm-hmm. We were hoping it was going to get all-party support in the House of Commons, and it could be law. Was unfortunately defeated by the Liberal majority in mm-hmm. the government. In the House of Commons this past week. That
was a bill to ask that the monies recovered be made explicitly available to the public. That the public
both to publish a tax gap, and the mm-hmm. CRA has started to do it, but this is be put it in legislation. But also to annually publish lists of those who are convicted mm-hmm. of this. It's a number of years since the Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers, and there have been no charges brought on that. Other countries have. In other cases as well, we've had companies that have promoted these types of tax schemes being given penalties, and that hasn't happened in Canada. 3 years ago, the House of Commons, this was such a controversial issue that the House of Commons Finance Committee held hearings into this Isle of Man, the KPMG Isle of Man tax scheme. But KPMG sent a letter after they appeared and to the chair of the Finance Committee and said that this is under court, so that people should not discuss this. Yeah. We had representatives, there were other tax experts, and the House of Commons Committee closed it down. We didn't think that they needed to do that. So we've been following to see, what's happening with those court cases. Yeah. And what we found out is that they're settled. We have no idea what's happening with the government going against KPMG, but the rationale for for not proceeding with that investigation through the House of Commons Finance Committee,
Yeah.
there doesn't seem to be any rationale for it.
And we know nothing about the proportion that they settled for or why they settled and what the conditions of the settlement were.
Exactly.
Well, we'll just have to wait, I guess, and see if Minister Le Boutillier follows through on this request for more transparency. I want to thank you very much for coming in. Thanks for...
Thank you very much.